The virtual CISO moment is brought to you by vCISO Services. vCISO Services' mission and calling is to provide quality cybersecurity and information security consulting and expertise for small and mid-sized businesses. While they are a leading provider of qualified and experienced virtual CISOs, they offer much more. Check them out at vcisoservices.com. Hi, I'm Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the Virtual CISO Moment. Nick Espinosa joins us. He is Chief Security Fanatic for Security Fanatics. He is the award-winning co-author of a best-selling cybersecurity book called Easy Prey, a TEDx speaker, host of the Deep Dive nationally syndicated radio show on various stations, and a whole bunch of other things. Nick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So you have a very interesting past, just looking on your LinkedIn profile. I would love to hear how you got into cyber, why you got into cyber, and your entire path to becoming an entrepreneur with Security Fanatics.
Sure. Yeah, so my basic 90-second life story or so is I actually got my very first computer when I was 5 years old, and yes, I am going back that far. And my dad set it up and all that, and he went to work, and the next day I took it apart piece by piece, screw by screw, and after he got done got done whooping me, I put it back together and it worked. I didn't know how to use it, but I was able to disassemble it and reassemble it. And at that point, to his credit, he said, "Hey, there's something here, game on," and there you go. So I built my first computer formally at 7. I could program in 12 languages by the time I was 9. I started getting very early certifications from like Novell, all of them, if you remember Novell back in the day, around 12, 13 years old, and all of that. And then I just started figuring out how to break into things, and that kind of got me down that road. And I just wanted to know everything about it. Once I understood how to use the computer, I wanted to understand how data could move from one place to the other, how I could get them to talk to each other. And once I figured that out, I wanted to understand, can I capture it? Can I break it? Can I do all those things? And, and fortunately, I kind of went down the good road, thanks to, I think, the ethics and morals that my parents pounded into me about wanting to help the world as opposed to take from it. And so it was just a natural progression into that. And then at 19, I founded my first corporation, grew that for about 15 years, before selling it, and then spun up Security Fanatics in 2015. So I like to say this is basically not in my blood, it's in my DNA. I love what I do, and I get to help people, and my goals for retirement have nothing to do with money. It's all about the amount of bodies that I can protect by the time I quit. So there you go.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I got a couple of quick questions. First of all,
yeah,
what type of computer was your first one, the one that you tore apart?
My very first computer was an IBM PC Junior. So it had a 5.25-inch floppy, 2 cartridges, came with a basic 1.0 and IBM PC DOS 1, and so I was able to play with that. No hard drive, and this is back in the Intel 8088 series, so it takes you way back.
And that was very close to what my first computer was. When now a little older, I was actually in college, and I have to admit I did not take my computer apart. But it was an IBM clone, an 8088 clone. It was a Hyundai, made by the same company, I believe, that makes cars. Which I used to joke that it had dual disc drive and 4-wheel drive. So
there you go. Very cool. Yeah.
But you're also the co-author of Easy Prey. Just talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Sure. So Easy Prey actually was a collaboration of multiple authors, basically different experts from different aspects of cybersecurity. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there is a huge umbrella that is cybersecurity. There's many different things that we do, from compliance to actual data security to training, not to mention red team, blue team, purple team, all those kinds of things. And so the elements that that I took for that book and co-authored was the compliance side of it, so like HIPAA compliance, PCI compliance, all those kinds of things. Understanding these kinds of frameworks, I think, are beyond important for businesses or organizations of any size. And so, I like to say that they gave me the sexiest, chapters in the book, because, who doesn't want to talk about compliance, right? So now that said, interestingly enough, I wrote that back in 2016-ish, give or take. 2015, I think it was published in 2016. I no longer recommend it because the world has changed that drastically, that fast. We've improved in our defensive capabilities and approaches to that point, including also evolving compliance to more stringent standards. And so while I'm happy to have done it, I don't recommend the book anymore, interestingly enough, even though it was a bestseller back then.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned how the world has changed and the threat environment certainly changes. And in 30 seconds, we're going to come back and talk about some threats to small and mid-sized businesses.
Yeah.
Bitdefender provides cybersecurity solutions with leading security, efficacy, performance, and ease of use to small and medium businesses, mid-market enterprises, and consumers. Guided by a vision to be the world's most trusted cybersecurity solutions provider, Bitdefender is committed to defending organizations and individuals around the globe against cyber attacks to transform and improve their digital experience. So before the break, we just briefly were talking. You were talking about how the threat environment has changed even radically since 2016 when Easy Prey came out, and really, it does seem that the threat environment changes on a very regular basis. And I know, for example, like none of us would have been talking about AI Chat GPT a year ago. It just
Right.
wasn't there.
Right.
So, from your perspective, what is a probably one of the top significant threats to small and mid-sized businesses today?
So honestly, if we're looking at this from an overarching standpoint, I mean, we can talk about ransomware, we can talk about phishing, we can talk about all of those things. But honestly, I think the biggest issue that small to mid-sized business have, hands down, is they do not understand their risk. And if you look at a small to mid-sized business, especially the leadership, it might be a generational business too, where I've run in, great grandpa started this business and I'm the fourth generation running this thing, and we've done it the same way for the last 100 years. And understand though that while some aspects of your business may be still relevant 100 years later, the world has changed, technology has improved, technology has increased, and what organizations do not understand is that no matter what you do, I don't care if you're installing HVAC systems or you're a financial auditing company or whatever you are, technology drives your business. You can't do anything without technology. You can't coordinate your crews to install that HVAC. You cannot, send out bills. You cannot receive anything. Technology is essentially what makes the engine of the economy run globally. I don't care what you're doing. Technology is your driver, and people don't understand that. And so when you have leadership, excuse me, that does not get that, they look at IT and they look at cybersecurity as this giant pit that's on fire, and they just keep throwing money into it, not realizing that this is an issue. And so, if I'm talking to a small or mid-sized business, if they can't tell me how many computers can be off for how long until it's so economically unviable for their organization, then how do they know what they're doing is right? How do they know their
Mhm.
backups are going to restore them in time? How do they know that they've got good redundancies in place to make sure that they can weather a tornado, a ransomware event, an earthquake, whatever it is? And these are huge problems. And oftentimes when I'm talking about risk, it's crickets. And so, yeah, we can talk about the actual technical vulnerabilities out there. I think one of the biggest issues that businesses have are things like training. Their people, really do think Prince Ubuntu from Nigeria needs help with his revolution. So let me send him my social security number and a credit card number, right? For whatever reason, people
So,
fall for
I,
these things,
I mean, it's still out there because it still
Yeah,
works, right?
of
So,
course, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, and think about the geography of hackers. Why do email scams come out of Nigeria and other places? It's because they don't have good, solid internet infrastructure. They can't sustain large bandwidth attacks, but you can fire off 100 emails, and if your internet's down for half the day, as soon as it fires up, it just plinks them out, and you just keep on going. Right. So we have to understand where these threats are coming from, but we also have to understand how to protect ourselves, and I really do think that starts with training, after you've quantified that risk.
Well, and I like that you focused on risk because that
Yeah.
is what I like to say is the primary or a primary duty, so that way I don't upset anybody. A primary duty of the chief information security officer is to provide sufficient and complete information to the C-suite and the board of directors about the threat environment so that they can make risk-informed decisions.
Right. Right. But
Um,
to that point, though, if I may,
yeah.
I think one of the big problems that CISOs have is that oftentimes they come from very technical backgrounds. They don't have management training, and they cannot do nerd to English translation. And so what ends up happening is you just cannot convey this in any real way to people that are just non-technical, but actually hold the purse strings, have the vision for the company. They cannot understand that you are the shield to the engine of their economy. And if you cannot convey that message plainly, you're going to have a very serious issue just trying to get the basic budget together. It's a huge problem.
Well, yeah, and you're kind of reading my mind here because where I was going with that was what can um, So suppose I'm like a CEO of a small, mid-sized business. I mean, I have made that big leap that I understand that I don't understand risk. So
Mhm.
that in and of itself is a big leap, and you got to start somewhere, and nobody can make
Right.
you understand that except for you. But
Right.
where do they turn to? What do they do? I mean, what is the best way for um, I guess for them to understand this risk, understanding too, just as you said, that sometimes some of the CISOs out there are more techie and less business.
Right. Yeah. Well, and in that vein, I mean, it really depends on who you've got to talk to. We see a lot of companies that we walk into, and for the record, my clients range from small to Fortune 100.
Mhm.
I'm advising global CISOs at the Fortune 100 level, and the problems are consistently the same. It's just they scale, right? There's obviously a lot less red tape. You're able to pivot faster, as a small business, but you don't have the internal maturity to really understand that you need that quality control. You need that indemnification inside your organization. And so if the company doesn't have anybody really to talk to or speak to, one, I highly recommend getting somebody that is qualified and trained on understanding, risk. But if you want to get down that road, start having that conversation. Start thinking about the worst case scenarios for your business. Understand that a ransomware event is probably going to be the worst business day of your life. I mean, those are the number one calls we get. Oh my God, help. I've never worked with you, but the world is burning down. Please help. Fortunately, though, the number two call is, yeah, we don't want to be that guy. So what do
Mhm.
we have to do? And those are the calls we love, right? Because you've got somebody motivated. But if you don't have anybody to speak to or talk to, start doing some basic math. Start getting in that ballpark. Understand, if everything was off right now, how much are you paying in salary, for people to sit there not doing anything, getting a free vacation on your dime? How much are you paying in electricity? How much are you paying for that fleet of trucks you have, if that's, if that's your business? And start quantifying that potential loss, and then look at it. Okay, what happens if we have an earthquake? What happens if we have a hacking event? What happens if our third party outsourced HR database gets hacked, and now we have to tell every single customer under the law that we just got their data breach, but it wasn't us, it was our third party supplier. Think about these things, start quantifying these things, but understand that risk is absolutely everywhere, and we're going to live with risk in some way, shape, or form. The goal is to quantify that risk and figure out what we can accept, what we can transfer out, what we can avoid, and then move down that road.
So you use the word quantify the risk, and there's a difference between quantified risk assessments and uh, uh, now I'm drawing a blank. The other one that's just basically where we have the heat map. I'm thinking about
Mhm.
quantifying risk assessments like FAIR, for example. Are you suggesting that they
Right.
go down that route?
So if you don't have a good equation in your life right now, like FAIR is a really solid one. Actually, one of the co-authors of that book, I actually did a podcast with, or like an interview with on another show, and it was a really great conversation,
Mhm.
on that. And one of the points that he made was, yeah, just start getting in that mindset. Whatever framework or platform you're using. I mean, if you look at threat, is your information value, your vulnerability, plus the monetary loss, then you're going to start to understand, okay, I'm in the ballpark. If I'm paying $100,000 in payroll every month and I'm losing $50,000, every 2 weeks because everybody's getting a free vacation on my time, how long can that happen? How long can I sustain that? And these are things that just kind of get you on that footing. So yeah, you can use FAIR. There was one that came out, a framework from Microsoft a while ago called Pasta that's pretty easy to use. But however you want to do it, the goal is just to start having that conversation if you have nobody qualified in your life to do it. And hopefully you do. We're out there, you know?
Yeah, I mean, my personal slant is towards FAIR, being open, fair, certified, and all of that. But
Yeah.
I often tell folks that at the very least, it's not a bad idea to try to run an analysis to see if maybe a tool is worthwhile, because we're all inundated with, well, get this new tool, it's going to solve all your problems and this and
Right.
that. Well, how do you know if that $50,000 tool is actually going to solve a $50,000 problem without doing some sort of
Right.
cost exposure
Right.
calculation?
Right, right. Well, even at the most basic level, I mean, I literally just had a client pass ISO 27001 certification. They're a small company, they're brand new, they're focusing on this, and they decided to do an internal risk assessment. And they literally just opened up an Excel file and said, okay, what are the worst case scenarios, for this business? And they've got locations in multiple countries, and they're saying, okay, what happens if, this country has a coup? Okay, didn't think of that, and so it's just getting you into that mindset. And once you can start quantifying it, then you can start applying things like GRC tools to that, for governance, compliance, all those kinds of things. But just getting down that road is I think the first step. Just having the conversation, is important. And use FAIR, leverage FAIR. FAIR is great. I'm not knocking any one of these frameworks. The point is that I think this is the one thing that small to mid-sized business miss, and they miss it constantly. And they want to talk to me about cybersecurity. And I say, no, we're not going to talk about cybersecurity first. We're going to talk about risk. Because if you cannot quantify that, then all I am is just selling products. It's not what I do, or nor am I playing whack-a-mole with your defense. We've got to be holistic as we approach this.
Absolutely. And I think part of that, I'd like your opinion on this, but I think part of that is that you talked about scenarios. A lot of times, well, of course, we'll recommend tabletop exercises to,
Absolutely.
at the very least, like do muscle memory exercises, if you will, to help uncover those. I remember, I like to tell this story, but it was in 2019 that we always script a different one every year. And for 2019, we did the scenario of a pandemic. And the reactions were, it's like, this is never going to happen, because a lot of times people, they don't like to do tabletops because they figure they think it's just a waste of a few hours of their time.
Right.
Your opinion on the value of tabletops with regards to understanding holistically the environment.
So I think tabletop exercises are excellent to go through because what they show is maturity or a lack thereof. Meaning, we've got this beautiful contingency plan, with all of these parts and all of these pieces. You get your key stakeholders, and then you throw out a scenario like a ransomware or a physical burglary or something, and they're all just completely going off script. Like, did you even read this thing? No, you've got procedures for this. If you're not flipping to that page, then what's the point? The whole point of having a good quantification of your risk and basically the good contingency plans is that, let's say I'm leading it and I get hit by a bus and somebody else has to lead this, they can pick it up. It's the same way like a cook on a battleship in the Navy, if he's the only one left, can run to the big cannon, literally pull out a book, and it says load this, press this, aim that, hit fire, and he can literally fire the cannon. That's the goal that we are moving to. So when I go through tabletop exercises and I see organizations that have had plans for years and they review them every year and they're just ignoring it, abandoning it, throwing things out, that shows me a lack of maturity. That shows me where they need to improve. So I think it's a really good enumerator of good, bad, and ugly in terms of the internal maturity that an organization has.
My experience, having done tabletop exercises now for small mid-sized businesses for like 6 years or so, is one of my favorite parts of the tests of the exercise, which inevitably 90%, not all, but 90% fail. At a certain part of the test, they had better bring out their IRP or the BCP or whatever it is.
Right.
And they almost never do.
Right.
And so at the end of it, it's like the question usually is like, when I tell them that you didn't bring this out, they're like, well, it's just an exercise. Well, that's the point.
Right.
It's like we're supposed to be testing what you're going to be doing
Right.
all around.
Right. Exactly. But also think about who you are dealing with. And a lot of these business exercises, sure, you're going to have leadership there that has some designated duties. Okay, go department head, inform your people of, do X or whatever it is. But when you're actually talking to like the IT staff and the cybersecurity staff, they go straight into troubleshooting mode and just throw the playbook out because that's how the mind works. Oh, did I turn the computer off and on again? Okay, great. Did I check this? Did I check this? And they're just doing these internal checklists where, no, this is a team effort. We have to collaborate. We have to work together to make sure that I'm fixing one thing while somebody else is fixing another thing, and somebody else is keeping the executives at bay that slow everybody down because every 5 minutes they want to pick up a phone and say, is the email up? Is the email up? Can we get in? What's going on? What's going on? And I tell leadership all the time, just shut up. Just shut up and let your nerds work.
Exactly.
They've got to get it done. You're just slowing them down, and here we are. And so, yeah, I think tabletop exercises are very valuable. I think it's a real good look into just how effective a team can be.
And you mentioned about the participation of like many folks, which I think that some folks sometimes don't get it. And this gives me the opportunity to get on my soapbox just for about 15 seconds. But I think the one time that I've ever had that a exercise completely failed, wasn't able to finish it, is that the company only wanted to have IT folks there. And we're about a third of the way through the exercise, and we're already starting to find some controls that are not working technical wise. Of course, we can't test some of the other stuff with regards to, well, what is your cyber policy? What is your communication strategy, legal, all that. And at one point in time, the IT director stops me. He says, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm pretty close. We know what's wrong. We don't want to go through that because we don't want executive management to know what's wrong with the IT infrastructure. I
Right.
don't know. I don't have anything else to say about that except that that was just like a big fail right there, I
Right.
thought.
Well, and what is that indicative of? That's indicative of they don't have buy-in from
It's
leadership. And so how,
no, yeah,
you know,
no buy-in, a lot of immaturity in the program, and if
yeah.
they really get hit with something, they're going to be in big trouble because they don't
Oh
have any
yeah.
communication going on.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's one of the biggest issues that we see. I mean, like I said, our number one call is data breach calls from people we've never worked with, and overwhelmingly, like 9 times out of 10, they're running around with their heads cut off. Oh, it's email. Oh no, it's communication in this other way. Oh, it's our database. This, and there's no consensus here, and you just waste time. And that's one of the biggest things that tabletop exercises enumerate is the wasted time that your organization is going to have trying to get back on their feet. And all the extra time is just money. You're just burning more money. You're losing reputation because now your customers are thinking, why on earth aren't they getting back to me? These guys kind of suck, So these are things that we have to take into place. It's things that have to be impressed upon non-technical leadership. But if you don't have the buy-in of the leadership, forget it. And
Yeah,
I'm literally shepherding a company through that right now, where their leadership understands and recognizes they need to do something like CMMC certification because they work in the defense supply chain, but they're not giving the resources to the IT team to need it. They're all
right.
stuck fixing printers all day. Who on earth is going to spearhead this? And these are things that I think are just lost in the fray if they're not properly conveyed.
So you talked a little bit here and there about some of the things that Security Fanatics does. What, just from a high, you've talked about that small businesses to large enterprises, and I don't think that you're limited to a certain industry. Kind of like succinctly in a nutshell, what is it that you all do, and how can you help businesses?
Sure, sure. I mean, so I like to say we do all things cybersecurity, cyber warfare, cyber terrorism, infrastructure, and government compliance related. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is obviously we're happy to help design, and implement cyber defense strategies and all of that. On the cyber warfare side of things, a lot of it is, research and coordination with other organizations. So, for example, just without getting into details, we've had really good access to the Ukrainian government to the point where I've been interviewing their members of parliament on my radio show. It's starting since like the break of the war,
Oh,
it's those kinds of things. On the cyber terrorism side, it's research. We have clients that get issued death threats by international terrorist organizations like Al Qaeda. So we are constantly tracking those kinds of things, when those come up, and then compliance and all those kinds of things as well. So we work with, everything from CMMC to GDPR and everything around the world, that we essentially have. But we got clients all over the planet. We go where the work is.
well, it's got to be pretty stressful. I know being an entrepreneur myself can be stressful, and being in cyber in any and all of the aspects can be stressful. What's one thing, Nick, that you do to get yourself away from all that stress?
So interestingly enough, this is something that I learned from Bill Gates, and I do not have oftentimes the time to do as much as he can with this, but he would take about 1 week a year, like 7 straight days, and unplug. Like no technology, no phones, no email, no nothing. He would take a stack of books. It would give him the ability to basically just get out of his mind, get out of the day to day, get out of the constant fray of absolutely everything, and then just plan, just think, just contemplate, just do those kinds of things. And I've had the ability to do that, not necessarily for 7 days straight, but when I'm out of my head, I'm able to, write. I'm able to figure out things. I write for Forbes and Smerconish of CNN and some others. I'm in the process of writing another book right now, sneak peek, but and that's I'm the sole author of that. So getting out of my head is one of those things that allows me to decompress. And we have a huge problem in cybersecurity with burnout right now.
Absolutely.
I literally just wrote that article a couple months ago for Forbes, where we are seeing about 1/3 of veterans, like our level, in the next 2 years just wash out because we're understaffed. We have a huge staffing shortage. There's more pressure. The hacking isn't stopping, and so these veterans are now starting to say, "Screw this," I'm going to go, I don't know, work in a puppy daycare or something because it's a lot easier. you
Well,
know.
well, I've
So,
got to admit that the thought of like accelerating retirement on my side occasionally crosses my mind. But, you know, I got a little stressed out when you said deconnecting for a week. And I'm like, I don't know if I could leave this for a week. That would be an
Yeah.
interesting exercise to try.
It's tough, honestly, but you feel better afterwards.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean,
you really
if I could
do.
do it for 2 days, I would say that that would be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's usually what it is. It's like a long weekend. And,
Yeah.
I'm in the Chicagoland area, and there's a old Civil War town. It's like a beautiful countryside. And so, go rent a house out there for like a long weekend and just relax and focus, and it's great. Just unplug. Internet sucks out there anyway, so there's no excuses.
So follow the Gilligan's Island advice. No phones, no lights, no motor cars, not a
Not a
single
single
luxury.
luxury.
I'm going to have to think about that. We'll call it Gilligan's Island part of the show from now on, the segment. Future plans. I know you said you're working on a book. Other plans?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the midst of working with the United Nations ITU on developing cyber defense strategies for developing countries. That's something I'm very proud of.
Nice.
That continuously stops and starts as the United Nations ITU is looking for money. So feel free to donate to that cause. I'm sure they could use the plug, but yeah, no, just as we continue to grow, the goal is at the end of the day, if I can have defended 1 billion people on the planet by the time I retire, I will count that as a win. And fortunately, I keep moving the goalposts. I started with 10 million and now we're up to 1 billion. So we'll keep on rolling.
That's awesome. That's an awesome goal. Love it. Love your story, Nick. And I appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And everybody, stay secure.